The IDF is continuing to expand their ground offensive as part of Operation Gideon's Chariots in Gaza. The army says they carried out more than 160 airstrikes in the past 24 hours and expanded ground operations targeting Hamas's infrastructure. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has the latest.
In northern Gaza, the army attacked terror squads, anti-tank positions, and military buildings. In central Gaza, underground tunnels and a weapons warehouse were hit. In southern Gaza, airstrikes targeted terror squads, booby trap buildings, a command center, and an anti-tank launching position. The Golani Brigade is operating in the Morag corridor between Hamas's Khan Yunis and Rafah brigades. So far, the troops have neutralized hundreds of terror sites, eliminated numerous terrorists, and located dozens of tunnel shafts. The IDF has called for Palestinian civilians to evacuate Khan Yunis. The roads are filled with the movement of Gazan residents of the southern Gaza city and surrounding areas. This after they were ordered to head westward for their safety and to receive humanitarian assistance. Prime Minister Netanyahu explained the war strategy.
בסוף להגיע למצב שיש לנו אזור שנשלט כולו על ידי צה"ל, וכל האוכלוסייה האזרחית של עזה יכולה להגיע לשם ולקבל את הסיוע כשהחמאס לא מקבל כלום. זה חלק מהכרעת החמאס, במקביל ללחץ הצבאי האדיר, הכניסה המסיבית שלנו, בעצם להשתלט על כל עזה, ולהוריד את החמאס מכל היכולת לבזוז סיוע הומניטרי. זו תוכנית המלחמה והניצחון. יש לנו מלחימה עצומה, עצימה ועצומה, ויש התקרבות, אנחנו הולכים להשתלט על כל שטחי הרצועה. זה מה שאנחנו הולכים לעשות.
The cost of the war continues to mount. The IDF announced that Sergeant Yosef Yehuda Shirak was killed during fighting in northern Gaza. Shirak, aged 22, served in the Combat Engineering Corps and is from the village of Arasha. Amid the ongoing IDF operation, a growing number of Palestinians have been coming out to protest against Hamas and calling for an end to the war. They chanted, "Stop the war" and the displacement, Hamas out. This was the first anti-Hamas protest in Khan Yunis in recent weeks, and protests have also been reported in other Gaza cities.
Steve, thanks so much for that report. And Israel received a stark warning from the UK, France, and Canada that, quote, concrete actions will be taken if it does not halt the war and boost humanitarian aid into Gaza. The unusual joint statement from three allies condemned Israel's handling of the humanitarian situation inside of Gaza and demanded an immediate halt to military operations, threatening further action if Israel refuses. The statement described the limited and approved by Israel aid to be insufficient and risks breaking international humanitarian law. Now, the statement also rejected what it called the permanent forced displacement of Gazan civilians, and three of the leading Israeli allies went on to say they have always supported Israel's right to defend itself against terrorists, but called the escalation entirely disproportionate. Responding to the joint statement and calling it a prize for terrorism, the Prime Minister's office said the war can end tomorrow if the remaining hostages are released and Hamas lays down its arms and Gaza is demilitarized. Now, is there growing tensions between Jerusalem and Washington? Well, reports are emerging that point to a decision made by J.D. Vance's decision to cancel a planned visit to Israel today. More from ILTV's Devo Klein.
A U.S. official has denied a Washington Post report quoting unnamed sources, claiming that the Trump administration would abandon Israel if it kept the war going in Gaza. In the denial, the official confirmed that there may be disagreement, but the idea that Washington would abandon Israel is preposterous. The Washington Post published quotes claiming that Trump's people are letting Israel know that the war must end. They went on to say, politically, as in the past, Netanyahu has a way to do that with a huge majority in the Knesset, but he does not have the political will. Amid the reports of differences between Jerusalem and Washington, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance has canceled a visit to Israel that would have taken place today. Speaking after the Pope's confirmation ceremony in Rome, Vance said that logistics caused him to change plans, but media speculation says it was to avoid showing U.S. support for the expanded IDF operation underway in Gaza. Vance said he is sure he'll visit in the future, but not today. A visit to Israel would have been Vance's first and would have softened Israeli concerns after the Trump visit to the Middle East appeared to sideline Israel in its regional diplomacy.
Thanks, Devo, for that report. And Israel's 2-month blockade on humanitarian aid has finally ended, with 5 trucks entering the Gaza Strip on Monday through the Kerem Shalom crossing, equipped with baby food and other aid. It was the first time since March 2nd aid entered the Gaza Strip after Netanyahu said the situation in the enclave shouldn't reach a state of starvation. Here's what else you need to know. The resumption of basic humanitarian aid officially began flowing back into the Gaza Strip after a 2-month pause. Back in March, Israel argued there was enough aid in the Gaza Strip as there was a 6-week ceasefire with frequent deliveries coming through at that time. The decision to halt the aid over the last 2 months comes as Israeli officials said Hamas was stealing the majority of the aid and believed it was necessary to pause the aid to put pressure on the group to make a deal for the release of the hostages. Residents in Gaza also confirmed that Hamas stole much of the aid, creating a black market for essential items like flour and selling them at astronomical prices, which most Gazans could not afford. Other Gazans reported that even the boxes Hamas was selling said, quote, not for sale, as it was delivered for humanitarian purposes.
מתחילת המלחמה אמרנו שכדי להשלים את הניצחון, להכריע את החמאס ולשחרר את כל חטופינו, 2 משימות שמשולבות זו בזו, יש תנאי אחד הכרחי. אסור לנו להגיע למצב של רעב, גם מבחינה עניינית, גם מבחינה מדינית. פשוט לא יתמכו בנו, לא נוכל להשלים את משימת הניצחון.
Netanyahu's decision to restart the aid into Gaza stems from growing pressure on Israel and following conversations with officials in the IDF, warning the enclave was on the brink of starvation. All of this as Israel ramps up intense military efforts in the Gaza Strip.
The purpose of the aid is to help the population, not to support Hamas. This is the rationale behind the new American model for aid presented 10 days ago by U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee. Few words about the new model of aid. An international fund, GHF, will operate based on this principle: direct aid to the population in Gaza, but not to Hamas.
Officials say the fund will distribute the aid in several centers located in safe areas in Gaza, but says the IDF will not be the ones to distribute the aid, and the center should open within a matter of days. Meanwhile, United Nations aid chief said the amount of aid that entered so far since the resumption is, quote, a drop in the ocean, what is urgently needed. And with 3 countries threatening to take concrete actions against Israel for not boosting the transfer of aid, and if it does not stop the military offensive in Gaza, what could be next for Israel? Joining us now to discuss is former Israeli ambassador Dani Ayalon. Thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Now, we know that Netanyahu decided this week to resume basic humanitarian aid into Gaza for, quote, diplomatic reasons, but a statement made by Canada, the UK, and France also are demanding for the military offensive to be halted. Were you surprised when you saw this joint statement released? And if Netanyahu is making a decision to resume aid because of it, could it also impact the military offensive in Gaza?
Yes, well, I wasn't too surprised about the European statement because it came in the wake of many other condemnations. We have had some disputes with Europe for decades now because they automatically take the Palestinian side, and what is deplorable now that they take the Hamas terrorist organization side without really looking at the entire picture with the context of things. The 7th of October, the fact that Gaza has become a terror state ruled by Hamas and supported by Iran. And it's not just a terror organization, Hamas. It's a terror organization which has taken a territory under its arms or wings or whatever, and in a coup in 2007 throughout the Palestinian authorities. So by this very support, or even indirect support of Hamas, I think the Europeans doing a disservice, not just to history and to morality and the, let's say, the ethics of war and conduct, but also to themselves, because this would encourage terror organizations which already have acted in Europe all over the world. And from Israel's point of view, we are in a very, very ruthless war with the Hamas. The United States is backing us, and the objective is, and I think Europe also has subscribed to this objective of actually never let Hamas rule again. And the Hamas is the most intransigent force at this point, not allowing any kind of a compromise or moving forward. And by this European statement, it's counterproductive, because instead of trying to solve the problem, actually they are aggravating it, because it gives more stamina and more backwind to Hamas not to release the Israeli hostages and not to give up its arms.
And we've actually seen a statement by Hamas talking about this joint statement that was released and welcoming it. Now, what does this mean for the diplomatic relations between Israel and these three countries?
Well, diplomatic relations now between Israel and these European countries is definitely strained. It had been strained in the past, also over issues with the Palestinians, except now I think it is very important to emphasize that they are not actually the supporting Palestinian cause, these European countries, but they support a terror organization. So I believe that they will still continue to, we will ride this relationship between Israel and Europe, will continue to ride this roller coaster. But at the end of the day, we all have to remember, we're talking about democracies, and democracies must support other democracies. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. We are a very important partner of Europe in terms of technology and science. And I believe that in time, things will get ironed out.
Now let's move on to what is happening on the ground in Gaza. Gazans have actually told me, and we've heard through other reports, Hamas has literally created a black market of products stolen from this type of aid and reselling them at astronomical prices inside of Gaza. Are there mechanisms in place to prevent this as this aid resumes?
I'm not sure that we have effective mechanisms in place yet. And here I think that the government of Israel was lax in not preparing for better infrastructure, for better plans for the day after, how to root out Hamas by replacing it with a different regime in Gaza. And the result is this chaotic situation. And since this humanitarian mechanism has not caught up yet with the needs of supplies to Gaza, and Israel has allowed humanitarian aid to Gaza, but still without any legitimate, let's say, organ to receive it. So there is a chance here that it will fall again into the hands of Hamas, which is using it against its own population.
On Monday, there was an extraordinary mass evacuation order on Khan Yunis by the IDF, and large anti-Hamas protests erupted hours after it. Now, the area is now deemed a combat zone. Why is this ground offensive expanding like this, and why wasn't it done before?
Well, it's a very good question. And this is, again, this points to the fact that this government of Israel, unfortunately, was not consistent, was not coherent. And sometimes it looks like with the haphazard policy, if at all, there is a coherent policy. The drive into Khan Yunis, which was actually the headquarters of Sinwar's, and the Sinwar brother was killed there in a special airstrike by the Israeli Air Force. And we have to clean up Khan Yunis, so long as they do not, give up their weapons, the Hamas. And we are trying our best to not let civil populations to be in harm's way. But this is a very complex situation. And here, Hamas, which is really Hamas is committing really two, not just war crimes, but crimes against humanity. Not only they are targeting Israeli citizens, but they're also using their own citizens as human shields.
And do you believe this enormous shift in military force in Gaza will lead to Hamas coming back to the table to reach an agreement? Tell me what you think it will take for that to happen, for them to actually want to make a deal.
Well, I believe that these heads of Hamas would very much like to keep their own lives. You know, all these terror organizations' heads, they are very happy to let other people die for them. But when it comes to their own lives and their families, they are much more careful. So hopefully, they, when the fire would come very, very close to them, maybe this will convince them to give up their arms. At the same time, there are these negotiations in Doha, Qatar, whereby they do get a chance. And I think Israel has said repeatedly that if they give up their arms, Israel would give them a safe passage out of Gaza.
Thanks so much for your perspective and for joining us today.
Thank you.
Now, Qatar's prime minister said today negotiations between Israel and Hamas have been stalled by, quote, fundamental differences after the prime minister's office says Israel's negotiating team was exhausting, quote, every possibility for a deal to free the hostages. Now, the delegation will be staying in Doha, although no progress has been made. There are several proposals on the table right now from Israel, Steve Witkoff, and even an Arab proposal as well. But right now, reports indicate Israel is waiting on a response from Hamas to the Witkoff framework. Now, this proposal seeks a 40 to 50-day ceasefire in exchange for 10 living hostages. Qatar's prime minister blames Israel for continuing their offensive in Gaza and said, quote, it undermines any potential chance for peace, as they believe there would be momentum after the release of Idan Alexander. And since 1951, Israel Bonds has raised over $54 billion in global investments, building connections, strengthening communities, and securing Israel's economic tomorrow. After October 7th, more than $4.8 billion was raised worldwide, a testament to the power of buying a bond and representing the unbreakable spirit of Israel, supporting Israel, and through Israel Bonds. It's not a charity, it's an investment. It's a bond of love, strength, and promise. Scan the QR code on your screen to stand with Israel and start investing for a brighter future today. And this week, ILTV partnered with Besheva and Arutz Sheva to host the Jerusalem Conference in New York City. The conference was attended by former hostages, Israeli politicians, Jewish leaders, and more. Take a look at this ILTV exclusive interview.
When Hamas and Iran are supporting your protests and praising your protests, there's something fundamentally wrong. And so obviously from the standpoint of what Congress can do, I have been fighting to pass the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act and hold these universities and colleges accountable to enforce Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. But also, frankly, I've supported what President Trump is trying to do when it comes to revoking these federal dollars for these institutions that fail to enforce the law, that fail to crack down on the vile anti-Semitism.
Iran cannot possess military nuclear capability. It cannot continue its support for terror organizations around the region. It cannot support terror organizations around the world. It cannot support like war in Ukraine. UAVs are flowing there, are made in Iran. It cannot allow the Houthis to act, etc., etc. So I suggest to be very determined in what is it that we want to achieve.
We hope that he's not going to sign a deal with Iran. It's going to be a grave mistake. They will either lie to him or wait until the next president will be elected, and then they'll continue their race to become a nuclear power. This is the time for military action. Iran is in its weakest point ever.
What is your message to these mullahs in Iran?
Well, one way or the other, they are not going to be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. They're not going to be allowed to enrich uranium. for civilian purposes as part of any agreement. And my view is that, obviously, trust but verify. And so from the standpoint of Iran, they are not trustworthy. They are not a nation that certainly has America's interest or Israel's interest at heart. And so we have to be cognizant of that as part of any negotiation. And we need to be prepared to act. From my vantage point, this is not Israel's fight alone. The United States has to stand shoulder to shoulder and ensure that Iran does not get a nuclear weapon one way or the other.
6 presidents promised to move the embassy to Jerusalem. How many did it? 1, President Trump. Who did the Abraham Accords? President Trump. Who recognized the Golan Heights as a part of Israel? President Trump. Who one day is going to get sovereignty in Judea and Samaria? I guarantee you, President Trump. So any Jewish person that doesn't love President Trump is a moron.
President Trump is making good moves for the United States, and that's not at the expense of Israel. Okay, so moving forward with Saudi Arabia is a great thing. Moving forward, trying to push Iran or pull Iran towards the United States is a good thing. And away from China and Russia and Iran.
The stronger Israel is, the better off the diaspora is. And I think we must maintain the connection between us. I think we must engage in supporting each other, in volunteering aspects, in explaining what is Israel doing, and exposing the truth, actually, because everybody, how many times have you heard the sentence saying, Israel has the right to defend itself? So many times. So what exactly does it mean? Can we say, please, guys, can we have our hostages back? Will it work this way? No, I don't think it's going to work that way. So reality is something that we must expose, and we can expose it together. And from the other side, Israel should support the diaspora all over the world, because we are the nation state of our people. So it's not only one-way street, it's dual traffic street.
And the family of shooting victim Se'ela Gez has officially named their baby who survived the attack that day, Ravid Chaim, a name chosen by his mother before she was shot and killed on her way to deliver him when they were driving past the Palestinian village of Brukim. He was named in a very special ceremony at the family's home while sitting Shiva for Se'ela. The 5-day-old infant is still in critical condition and was delivered by emergency C-section after his 30-year-old mother died. The ceremonial Brit Milah could not yet be performed because of the baby's condition. And now, on a more positive note, a heartwarming story. Former Israeli hostage Omer Shem Tov was at the iconic Fenway Park in Boston on Monday night. Shem Tov was called on to throw out the ceremonial first pitch before the start of the MLB game between the New York Mets and the Boston Red Sox. Shem Tov wore a Red Sox jersey with his name on the back and a yellow hostage ribbon on the front. His sneakers were inscribed with the phrase, "Bring them home." The 22-year-old was released from Hamas captivity after 505 days in a tunnel inside of Gaza after his abduction from the Nova Music Festival. His trip to Massachusetts was sponsored by the Combined Jewish Philanthropies as part of his family's campaign to get all of the Israeli hostages back home. Let's take a look at the weather forecast. The IDF is continuing to expand their ground offensive as part of Operation Gideon's Chariots in Gaza. The Army says they carried out more than 160 airstrikes in the past 24 hours and expanded ground operations targeting Hamas's infrastructure. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has the latest.
In northern Gaza, the army attacked terrorist squads, anti-tank positions, and military buildings. In central Gaza, underground tunnels and a weapons warehouse were hit. In southern Gaza, airstrikes targeted terrorist squads, booby trap buildings, a command center, and an anti-tank launching position. The Golani Brigade is operating in the Morag corridor between Hamas's Khan Yunis and Rafah brigades. So far, the troops have neutralized hundreds of terrorist sites, eliminated numerous terrorists, and located dozens of tunnel shafts. The IDF has called for Palestinian civilians to evacuate Khan Yunis. The roads are filled with the movement of Gazan residents of the southern Gaza city and surrounding areas. This after they were ordered to head westward for their safety and to receive humanitarian assistance. Prime Minister Netanyahu explained the war strategy.
בסוף להגיע למצב שיש לנו אזור שנשלט כולו על ידי צה"ל, וכל האוכלוסייה האזרחית של עזה יכולה להגיע לשם ולקבל את הסיוע כשהחמאס לא מקבל כלום. זה חלק מהכרעת החמאס במקביל ללחץ הצבאי האדיר, הכניסה המסיבית שלנו, בעצם להשתלט על כל עזה ולהוריד את החמאס מכל היכולת לבזוז סיוע הומניטרי. זו תוכנית המלחמה והניצחון. יש לנו מלחימה עצומה, עצימה ועצומה, ויש התקרבות, אנחנו הולכים להשתלט על כל שטחי הרצועה. זה מה שאנחנו הולכים לעשות.
The cost of the war continues to mount. The IDF announced that Sergeant Yosef Yehuda Shirak was killed during fighting in northern Gaza. Shirak, aged 22, served in the Combat Engineering Corps and is from the village of Arasha. Amid the ongoing IDF operation, a growing number of Palestinians have been coming out to protest against Hamas and calling for an end to the war. They chanted, "Stop the war" and the displacement, Hamas out. This was the first anti-Hamas protest in Khan Yunis in recent weeks, and protests have also been reported in other Gaza cities.
Steve, thanks so much for that report. And Israel received a stark warning from the UK, France, and Canada that, quote,